Hello and welcome back to my channel. I'm Judy and I have a passion for travel, history, and geography. During our video visits to the Loire Valley, we keep coming across the name Plantagenet. That name was attached to the clan long after the founder, a man named Ingilger, or possibly his father, began rise to historical notice. The saga of the family spans from the 800s CE all the way to 1485, which was a remarkable run for just one family. They started small, with just one or two small fortifications, but eventually controlled all of England and half of what is today's France. These warlike, ambitious, and incredibly tenacious men and women operated in a world of soldiery, fights, invasions, knighthood, battles, diplomacy, and marriages, the beginning of the feudal system. And they not only used all of these to their advantage, but they thrived. Let's time travel. Pour yourself a glass or a cup of your favorite beverage, settle in, and join me, the armchair traveler, as we unroll the scrolls of history together, revealing one family whose exploits shaped both France and England and how they came to grief. This family once ruled over what historians now refer to as the Angevin Empire, shown here in shades of pink and red. It had a serious influence also in the county of Toulouse, the yellow area, effectively surrounding the tiny kingdom of France and its vassals. Although they never called it the Angevin Empire themselves, their realm stretched from Scotland all the way down to the Mediterranean, with one branch reaching all the way to Jerusalem. This wasn't built overnight. It took centuries, generations of war, diplomacy, marriage, and scheming to assemble such a vast and powerful domain. To understand how the Angevins arose, you need to rewind to when the Merovingians were fading and a new dynasty, the Carolingians, were just beginning to rise. As the Merovingian kings weakened, their mayors of the palace ran things on a day-to-day basis. This was a subtle shift at first. They were really just administrators. But gradually, real power slipped out of the crown's hands. One key figure was a man named Pepin of Herstal in the 7th century. He crushed his rivals, expanded the territory, and secured dynastic ties, even marrying his daughter into the royal family in what would be the first of the marriage games. He was laying the groundwork for a dynasty in all but name. Then came his son, Charles Martel. In 732, he won the famous Battle of Tours, halting an Arab advance into Europe. Martel never took the crown, but make no mistake, he was king in all but name. Martel's son was a little more ambitious. Pepin the Short finally made it official. In 751, with the Pope's blessing, he deposed the Merovingians. The Pope, in turn, crowned Pepin, a reminder of how religion and politics were quite tightly bound. But power was never straightforward. The Frankish kings afterwards split their lands among sons, inviting rivalries. When Pepin died in 768, his sons, Charlemagne and Carloman, immediately clashed. Charlemagne claimed the throne, but Carloman questioned his very right to rule. Then Carloman died suddenly in 771, and Charlemagne seized his chance. He united the kingdom under his sole rule, setting the stage for an extraordinary reign. Charlemagne would go on to be crowned emperor in 800, launching the Carolingian Renaissance of learning, law, and culture. But no ruler and no dynasty lasts forever. When he died in 814, his son, called Louis the Pious, inherited the empire. Louis wanted unity, but the sheer size of his lands and the ambitions of his sons made that dream impossible. In 843, Louis's heirs signed the Treaty of Verdun, splitting the empire into 3 pieces. Charles the Bald, as he's known to us, took the west. Louis the German got the east, and Lothar got the middle part, stretching from the Low Countries to Italy. This division weakened the dynasty and opened the door for local lords to rise and look for power on their own. Kings depended on nobles to defend their realms from Viking raids and internal revolts. One of those nobles was a man named Ingilger of Anjou, the ancestor of the Angevins, and the starting point for the empire that one day would surround France itself. Ingilger's rise to prominence is something of a mystery. Historians still debate the details, but the story seems to go that he successfully repelled a Viking attack. And in the 9th century, that was no small feat. It was enough to earn the trust of Charles the Bald, or perhaps one of his heirs, who made Ingilger the Viscount of Orleans. From there, Ingilger established himself in Anjou. His title of count didn't just give him prestige. It confirmed what was already true. He controlled the land and its governance. In the feudal world, that meant serious power. In most cases, the title of count was hereditary, so Ingilger's control over Anjou wasn't just for his lifetime. It was a foundation for his family's long-term influence in the region. This was the world of feudalism, a system built on a web of obligations. The kings granted land and power in exchange for loyalty and military service. A count owed service to his king, but he had his own vassals, creating a kind of sub-chain of power that defined medieval society. But there was always a catch. No matter how powerful a vassal became, he was still technically a vassal and ranked below the king. And history had already shown what happened when a king failed to control and protect his lands. The Merovingians learned that one the hard way. They lost their crown. Later medieval storytellers, especially in the 12th century when the Plantagenets wanted to glorify their lineage, probably exaggerated Ingilger's achievements. But the truth is, he didn't need much embellishment. His leadership in Anjou, his military prowess and success, his place in the feudal hierarchy laid the groundwork for something much bigger, the beginnings of an empire. And that made him both an ally worth having and a potential threat to any king who underestimated him. The Ingilger family tree is complicated enough and made harder to understand because so often they reuse the names. There are a real bundle of Fulks and Geoffreys until we finally get to Henry. Trying to keep it straight actually made my head spin. All this groundwork paved the way for the Angevin Empire, but to understand it, we need to work our way through generations of their predecessors in this highlights reel. Ingilger I was the first of the line. He had no royal blood that I can tell, but he laid the foundation and gained social standing through marriage and services as a loyal and extremely efficient vassal of Charles the Bald. Fulk I, sometimes called Fulk the Red, consolidated power in Anjou by building key fortresses along the Loire River, strengthening the defenses against the same Vikings that his father had fought off, and aligning himself closely with the kings of West Francia. That secured his family's rise from local lords to powerful counts. His son, Fulk II, sometimes called the Good, further expanded the family influence through diplomacy and marriage alliances, most notably by marrying into the ducal house of Aquitaine. He was never duke there, but he was related to them, and earned its epithet, the Good, for being a pious and just ruler, praised by contemporaries because he seemed to value learning and church ties over brute force. His son was Geoffrey I, called Greymantle. He expanded the family power through wars and alliances, built and fortified castles to secure his territories, most notably at Langeais, and earned his nickname from the distinctive gray cloak he often wore. Geoffrey was succeeded by Fulk III, called the Black, a warrior and builder of over 100 castles and abbeys, who lived a long and eventful life. His nickname Nera the Black likely referred to his dark hair or possibly his grim, fearsome reputation as a ruthless and often violent ruler, reflecting both his appearance and his ambitious character. Next in line came Geoffrey II Martel, sometimes called the Hammer. He expanded the family influence, like his predecessors, through military campaigns, most notably adding Maine and defending his lands against Normandy, earning that nickname the Hammer for his forceful and relentless approach to warfare. Geoffrey, however, died with no male heir. After Geoffrey II Martel died without sons, the county of Anjou passed to his nephews, the sons of his sister. The oldest of these men was Geoffrey III, called the Bearded. He rose to power as count in 1060, but quickly proved to be ineffective and lost control of Maine, alienating his vassals, and ultimately was overthrown by his ambitious little brother, called Fulk IV. Fulk IV, called the Wretched, the word seems to mean quarreler or grumbler, seized power from his brother Geoffrey in 1068 and ruled Anjou for 50 turbulent years, marked by endless feuds, marital scandals, and political struggles that weakened the county, but set the stage for his son, Fulk V. Fulk IV was that guy, the kind of man that a dad with a shotgun would run off today. According to the medieval chroniclers, he was loaded with reprehensible, even scandalous habits. Like what? Well, he had a lot of wives and a lot of women, and get this, he was blamed for popularizing outrageous long-toed shoes called pigashes. later renamed Poulon. Apparently, your shoes could get you labeled as a subversive back then by the church. But the real drama came with his wife and her relationship with King Philip of France. This is a wild power play in medieval history. You can think of all of these people as ruthless and scandalous. Back then, you'll recall, marriage wasn't generally about love, although that did happen. It was a high-stakes merger and acquisition deal. Each side bargained hard over what they'd bring to the table. Land, alliances, wealth, and what would happen if things went south. In 1089, Fulk was in a politically shaky position, having just fought off his older brother to become count. So marrying Bertrade de Montfort seemed like a win-win. He got the powerful Montfort connections and stability for his rule, and Bertrade's dad snagged some castles and land near the royal border. Bertrade gained a title better than what she had. She became a countess and a husband. Fulk got legitimate heirs, or at least the promise of them, in what looked like a perfect political chess move. But the marriage was a disaster. Fulk's notoriously wild lifestyle and violent temper made things absolutely miserable. Bertrade reportedly found the marriage not just unhappy, but possibly dangerous because he was a violent man. The counts were vassals of the king, and so they floated in and out of the court in Paris. Here's where we meet King Philip I of France. He was captivated by Bertrade and convinced her to leave Fulk and marry him instead, igniting a scandal that shook the entire French court. Philip had just dumped his lawful wife Bertha, shown in this image in the tower on the left, and neither he nor Bertrade had proper annulments from their previous spouses. The Pope excommunicated the two of them. Political reality won out, and the Pope eventually lifted the ban because Philip was the powerful king and a key ally to the church, while Fulk was just a regional troublemaker. Philip's kingdom was the backbone of France and papal influence, so despite the scandal, the church chose to overlook everything in favor of political stability. Fulk lost the game, and the papacy made it clear who really held the cards. Fulk IV had left behind a messy legacy. You'll recall his older son, Geoffrey the Hammer, had served as co-ruler but died before his father and never moved on to the throne. The younger brother, Fulk V, born in 1089, dead by 1143, continued then. It really expanded the dynasty. He wasn't your average medieval noble. His life straddled two very different worlds, the cutthroat feudal politics of France and the high-stakes holy wars of the Crusader states, and he was successful in each. He started out as Count of Anjou in 1109, picking up the messy legacy of his father, Fulk IV. Like any good Angevin, he kept his barons in check, but in 1119 his life took a dramatic detour, handing the country over to his son Geoffrey and heading east on pilgrimage. That trip plugged him straight into Crusader politics, and when Baldwin II of Jerusalem went looking for a son-in-law strong enough to protect his kingdom, Fulk was going to be the man. In 1129 he married Baldwin's daughter, Melisende, and within a year the two were crowned king and queen of Jerusalem. He turned Anjou over to Geoffrey V, the son of his first wife, and known to us as Geoffrey Plantagenet. Now, Fulk's reign in the Holy Land was anything but quiet. He faced off against Genghis the Mosul, one of the deadliest Muslims of the age. He threw himself into fortifying castles in Jerusalem, Jaffa, and Ascalon, creating a defensive shield that kept the Crusader states alive. But he also clashed with Melisende. When her father died, Melisende imagined herself as queen regnant and Fulk as king consort, husband but not ruler. He had other ideas. He tried to cut her out of power, only to find the local barons sided with her. There was a showdown some years later in 1134, but the couple struck some kind of a balance and ruled side by side. In 1143, disaster struck. There was a hunting accident and Fulk fell off his horse and died. Melisende stepped up as regent for their son, Baldwin III, proving that the dynasty he built was there to stay. His legacy? He carried Angevin ambition eastward, turned Jerusalem into a fortified stronghold, and showed how the wild heroics of the First Crusade were giving way to hard-nosed dynastic rule. He left behind an equally capable, ambitious, and ruthless son in the form of Geoffrey V, Count of Anjou, and better known to us as Geoffrey Plantagenet. It's time to turn our eyes back to the west and north, where we meet another ambitious, militarily savvy, and ruthless family and explore the far-reaching consequences that occurred when these two families eventually merged. William the Conqueror had been the illegitimate son of Robert I, Duke of Normandy, and his mistress, a woman named Herleva. The Dukes of Normandy had ruled the region for over a century, tracing their line back to Rollo, a Viking leader who was granted land there in 911 CE. Despite his illegitimacy, William inherited the duchy as a child and over decades became a formidable and ambitious ruler. By 1066, as Duke of Normandy, he crossed the English Channel, defeated King Harold at the Battle of Hastings, and claimed the English throne. When William died, he divided his holdings. Normandy went to his oldest son, Robert Curthose. England went to the second son, William Rufus, and the youngest boy, Henry, received nothing but a chest of silver. In 1100, William Rufus died in a mysterious hunting accident. Henry seized the treasury, rushed to London, and was crowned King Henry I of England. Robert Curthose, distracted by the First Crusade and later tied up in Normandy, couldn't stop him. When he did try, Henry defeated him at the Battle of Tinchebray and locked him up for life. Henry knew that he was not English, and he needed some kind of English ties to satisfy the nobles. He married a girl named Edith of Scotland, who changed her name to Matilda, and they had several children. Their most important heirs were William Adelin, the only legitimate son, and a daughter named Matilda after her mother. To strengthen England's continental ties, Henry arranged for Matilda to marry Henry V, Holy Roman Emperor, in 1114. She traveled to Germany, became empress, and linked England to Europe's most powerful ruler. Tragedy struck in 1120 when William Adelin died in the White Ship disaster, leaving Henry without a male heir. Matilda, the daughter, was still in Germany and became the focus of his succession plans. Henry V, her husband, died in 1125, leaving her a widow. She returned to England, where her father formally named her as his heir. The Counts of Anjou were neighbors of Normandy and had long coveted both Normandy and England for their wealth, fertile lands, and strategic position. Around 1128, Henry, the King of England, arranged for his widowed daughter Matilda to marry Geoffrey of Anjou, son of Count Fulk V. Geoffrey was only 15 and Matilda was 25, but the marriage brought lands, legitimacy, and a powerful dynastic alliance. Geoffrey and Matilda's oldest son was Henry, who would become the first Plantagenet king. After Henry I died, a 20-year civil war called the Anarchy broke out, in which Matilda asserted her claims to the throne, earning herself the title of Lady of the English. Geoffrey, her husband, didn't personally help her fight for the English throne, but he did conquer and pacify Normandy, eventually upgrading his title from mere Count of Anjou to Duke of Normandy. Geoffrey of Anjou died in September of 1151, leaving young Henry as the Duke of Normandy and Count of Anjou. As a vassal of the King of France, Henry visited the French court to secure recognition of his inheritance and negotiate his position with King Louis VII, likely meeting the still lovely but very unhappy Queen Eleanor of Aquitaine in the process. The next year, 1152, Eleanor and Louis divorced, and Henry married Eleanor, bringing the vast and wealthy Duchy of Aquitaine under his control. This dramatically expanded his continental holdings, consolidating Normandy, Anjou, and Aquitaine, and laying the foundation for the Angevin Empire. All that was missing was England. Young Henry then decided to press his mother's claim to the English throne. By the early 1150s, after years of civil war, King Stephen faced a harsh reality. His only son was dead, he has no living heir, and continued fighting would only prolong England's suffering. He agreed under the Treaty of Wallingford in 1153 that he would still remain king for life, but Henry II would inherit the throne. Henry II would spend the rest of his life, as had his ancestors, scheming, fighting, and arranging marriages to expand and secure his empire. It would all come to grief eventually, but that is a tale for another time. Come back next time for another walk through history and visit to France with me, the Armchair Traveler, as your guide.